Have you ever walked into a house that was supposed to be your home, maybe for a holiday, maybe just for dinner, and felt like you were stepping into someone else's story? My name is Madeline Pierce, and if you've ever stood in a crowded kitchen holding a casserole and searching for your place at the table, then you might find a little bit of yourself in mine. Before the lines were drawn, before the quiet goodbyes, I was the daughter who always showed up. I remembered birthdays, brought extra chairs, smoothed over arguments with laughter and pie. But sometimes being the reliable one means people forget you're a person, not a utility, until one holiday changed everything. It wasn't snowing yet that Thanksgiving, but the wind cut straight through my coat as if the season knew something I didn't. My son Sam shuffled beside me with a pie balanced in both hands, my daughter Lila's small fingers tangled with mine. When we walked through my parents' back door, the kitchen was alive with the smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey just like always. But this time nobody looked up. My mother folded napkins with tight precision, my father swirled his drink at the window, my siblings joked about football and mortgages, already deep in their own conversations. I set down my casserole made from scratch like every year on the counter and waited for someone to notice. They didn't, and in that moment I realized I was a guest in the house where I grew up. I think every family has their unspoken rules, and ours was simple. Maddie will handle it. She'll keep the peace, bring the dessert, patch up the rough edges. For years, I did paying bills and secret babysitting at the last minute, picking up the pieces so no one else had to feel the cracks. Sometimes it felt like love. Sometimes it felt like duty. I believed for a long time that being needed was the same as being wanted. But as I watched my children being shuffled off to a kid's table in the den, paper plates, and a pizza box where there used to be extra chairs and laughter, I felt something shift. Maybe you know that feeling, the slow ache of realizing you don't quite belong, even when you've done everything right. That night after the dessert was barely touched, and the goodbyes were quick and awkward, I bundled Sam and Lila into the car and drove home in silence. The city lights blurred past as I wondered if I had done something wrong. Or if maybe it was time to choose a different story for myself and my kids. Was it possible, I wondered, to build a new definition of family, one where kindness wasn't measured by sacrifice and love didn't mean losing yourself? That question is what carried me quietly but firmly into the year that changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to know this isn't a story about villains and heroes, about good daughters and bad parents. It's about invisible labor and quiet heartbreaks, about boundaries, courage, and the kind of love that doesn't always fit the picture frame. If you've ever questioned where you truly belong, or wondered if you're allowed to put yourself first, then I hope you'll stay with me. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stop showing up for a table that was never set for you, and start building a new one where you and the people you love are always welcome. It's strange how the cold can make you feel awake and invisible at the same time. That Thanksgiving, as I stepped out of the car and pulled my coat tighter around me, I felt the sting of November wind not just on my skin, but somewhere deeper too. My son Sam pressed closer, balancing the pumpkin pie like it was a golden ticket, while my daughter Lila reached for my hand, eyes bright with expectation. Walking up the stone path to my parents' back door felt familiar, a muscle memory of holidays past full of laughter and the hum of family. But that day, everything felt off, as if I'd stumbled into a play where everyone else had already memorized their lines, and my part had been cut. Inside the kitchen looked just the same, the rich scent of cinnamon and sage, the turkey resting on the counter, my mother arranging napkins with an anxious energy I remembered from childhood. But no one paused when we walked in. My father gave a distracted nod from the living room, swirling his bourbon with a practiced hand, his eyes fixed somewhere outside. My brother Ben was laughing loudly with Uncle Rick, already halfway through a drink, while his wife Kayla perched on the armrest, her laughter light, but somehow far away. No one asked about the drive. No one looked at Sam or Lila's new winter coats, or the pie we carried still warm. For a moment, I just stood there, unsure if I should set down the casserole or quietly take my children and leave. I've heard people say that every family has a helper, the one who remembers birthdays, sends thank you notes, and smooths over every conflict before it becomes a crack in the foundation. For as long as I could remember, that was me. I organized gift exchanges, covered extra bills when my parents were short on cash, and called my siblings to remind them to check in with Mom on tough anniversaries. I thought being dependable was a kind of superpower, something that kept the family running smoothly, even when no one noticed the work. But the truth is, sometimes that role becomes a trap one you don't realize you're in until the silence feels heavier than the conversations ever did. As I counted the place settings, 12 plates, 12 folded napkins, 12 name cards written in Kayla's flowing script, I felt my heart drop. There was no kids' table this year, no folding chairs pulled in from the garage, no extra seats. Just 12. Ben's kids were already settled in the den, a pizza box open on the coffee table, a cartoon flickering in the background. "It'll be more fun for them," my sister Daniela said when she caught me looking. "They can watch a movie and make a mess." I nodded, but Lila squeezed my hand uncertain. In that moment, it was clear the family I'd tried so hard to keep together had learned how to live without us. I helped Sam and Lila settle onto the fuzzy blanket in the den, making sure they each had a slice of pizza and a paper cup of lemonade. They called it the fun table, but no one had actually asked if that's where they wanted to be. I kissed the top of Lila's head and adjusted Sam's collar, his eyes fixed on me quietly, searching for reassurance. "When are we going home?" he whispered, voice small in the glow of the TV. I managed a smile and said, "Soon. Not just yet. Sometimes the hardest thing in the world is pretending things are okay for your children when your own heart is breaking." I promised myself right then that I would listen to their needs more closely than I ever had before. Back in the kitchen, the conversations rolled on without us. No one asked about my new job or if I needed help with Lila's asthma medication. The silence after I said Happy Thanksgiving was sharper than any argument. I set the casserole down beside the deviled eggs untouched and quietly told the room we'd be heading home after dessert. There was a pause, the kind that makes you realize people hear you, but don't really listen. Ben raised his glass, making a joke about how busy moms are always in a rush. Kayla laughed loud brittle like a bell breaking. For a long moment, I wondered if I'd ever truly belonged here, or if I'd simply filled a space that was convenient for everyone else. Here's the thing I wish someone had told me sooner: being needed isn't the same as being valued. There's a difference between being included and being truly seen. Families are supposed to be safe harbors, but sometimes they become places where old roles are rehearsed, so often no one notices who you've become. That Thanksgiving. I learned that showing up out of habit is not the same as showing up out of love, especially when the welcome mat feels more like a warning sign. When we finally slipped out, coats zipped casserole half-eaten children yawning in the back seat. The drive home felt quieter than any silence I'd known. In the rearview mirror, I watched Sam and Lila lean into each other, their trust in me undimmed by grown-up disappointments. That night, as I tucked them in and turned out the lights, I realized the first step in building a new story isn't about leaving behind what's broken. It's about listening to what hurts, honoring the ache, and daring to imagine something better for the ones you love most. And that's where my real journey began. Some labels cling to us longer than any nickname or family joke. In my family, responsible was another word for will always come through. I don't remember exactly when it started. Maybe it was the time in middle school, when Mom called from work and asked if I could get dinner ready for Ben and Daniela, or the summer after college, when Dad's knee surgery meant I managed his bills and drove him to every checkup. It didn't seem like a big deal then. In fact, it felt good to be needed. My siblings would sigh with relief, and my parents would say, "What would we do without you, Maddie?" I thought it was a compliment. I wore it like a medal, not realizing how heavy it would become. But as the years stacked up, so did the expectations. I was the first call when anyone lost a job or needed a loan. I kept mental lists of birthdays, medications, and favorite foods. I helped Ben fill out his first apartment application, covering the deposit when his check bounced, and proofread Daniela's resumes late into the night. If my mother needed someone to talk to about her worries, it was always my phone that rang. When Kayla and Ben's marriage hit a rough patch, I offered to babysit so they could go to counseling. It was 100 small, invisible tasks woven into the fabric of daily life, each one feeling manageable on its own. But together over time, they shaped my identity in ways I never quite consented to. I see this pattern everywhere, especially among women I know. My friend Rebecca, for example, is the fixer in her family, too. Last winter, her brother was in a car accident, and before the ambulance had even left the driveway, she was the one on the phone with the insurance company, the one who organized the meal train, the one who cleaned his apartment and made sure the bills didn't pile up. If I don't do it, who will? She asked me one night, exhaustion written across her face. We laughed, but it was a tired sound. So many of us are taught by families, by movies, by stories that our worth comes from holding everyone else together, even if it means unraveling a little ourselves. Looking back, I realize that responsibility is a gift best given by choice, not obligation. When you're praised for being the steady one, it's easy to believe that love is something you earn by being indispensable. I didn't notice the shift until years later, when being helpful felt less like a choice and more like a demand I couldn't opt out of. The truth is, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a family is to let them struggle a little, to let them find their own solutions, even if it means stepping back. No one ever said that aloud in my house. But now I wish I'd learned to say no sooner, before the weight became my whole identity. Here's a small lesson I carry with me. You are allowed to choose yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable. The world won't end if you miss one birthday, or if someone else forgets to pick up milk. Sometimes letting go of the reins is the only way for others to grow and for you to remember who you are, beneath all the lists, all the planning, all the fixing. For years, I was terrified that stepping back would make me selfish or uncaring. But I'm learning slowly that healthy boundaries aren't a rejection of family. They're a way to love more honestly and to give yourself space to breathe. That Thanksgiving night, as I watched Sam and Lila drift off to sleep, I asked myself a question I'd been avoiding for years. Who am I when I'm not the one holding everyone together? What does it look like to choose my own peace, even if it means disappointing the people I love? I didn't have an answer yet, but I promised myself I would try to find out one small step at a time. In the days that followed, the familiar rhythm of calls and texts, continued requests for help, updates on old problems, the subtle, constant reminders that I was still the family's steady anchor. But something in me had shifted. The next time the phone rang, I let it go to voicemail. And for the first time, the quiet that followed didn't sound like loneliness. It sounded a little like freedom. If you've ever felt utterly exhausted, but couldn't quite point to what wore you out, you may know something about invisible labor. It's the mental load that hides in plain sight, the remembering, the reminding, the anticipating what everyone else will need. In my family, I was the invisible engine making doctor appointments, tracking allergies, updating emergency contacts, planning who'd pick up Grandpa for holidays. These weren't heroic acts. They were small, necessary, and so routine that nobody noticed them unless I forgot one. There's an old saying, the better you are at something, the less people notice you're doing it at all. That became the silent rule in our house. I remember one spring when Ben had the flu just as Dad was scheduled for minor surgery, and Daniela was preparing for her grad school interviews. That week, I spent my evenings juggling phone calls, prepping soup for Ben, emailing reminders to Daniela about what documents to bring, and double-checking insurance forms for Dad. I even texted Kayla a shopping list when I realized she'd forgotten diapers on her grocery run. Nobody asked me to coordinate these things. But the expectation hung in the air. If it needed to be done, I would do it. By Sunday night, I was so worn down, I forgot to eat dinner. The only acknowledgement I got was a quick thanks, Maddie, as Ben coughed from the couch eyes fixed on the TV. Invisible labor is so common, especially for daughters' mothers and the so-called dependable ones, that it becomes invisible even to ourselves. My friend Tanya once joked that she feels like a stage manager for her entire extended family. If I stopped keeping track of birthdays, the whole family group chat would go silent in July, and nobody would notice until December, she laughed. We both understood that humor was just a shield for something heavier. There's a difference between being helpful and being taken for granted, and the line can blur so slowly you don't realize you've crossed it until resentment has taken root. The myth of fairness in families is a tempting one. We want to believe that everyone pitches in equally, that love naturally balances the scales, but real life is messier. Some people step up, others step back, And often the hardest workers are the least recognized. I wish someone had explained that to me sooner before the pattern was set. Sometimes I'd lie awake and wonder, is it so wrong to want someone to notice just once how much I hold together? But then guilt would creep in. Shouldn't love be unconditional? Wasn't this what families do? Here's the truth I've come to accept: love and labor are not always the same. You can care deeply for your family and still need your contributions acknowledged. You can set boundaries and still be generous. The work of keeping a family running smoothly is important, but it shouldn't come at the cost of your own well-being or sense of self. That's a lesson I wish I could teach every helper out there. Your needs matter too. You're allowed to want balance, and you're allowed to ask for help. As the weeks after Thanksgiving rolled by, I started quietly noticing all the small things I did that kept the wheels turning, not out of pride, but as a gentle reminder to myself that these tasks had value. I even began letting some of them slide. If the birthday card was late, or the reminder went unsent, I told myself it was okay. The world didn't fall apart. The family chat got quieter, but no one starved. No one got lost on their way to the doctor. In fact, sometimes someone else, usually Daniela, sometimes even Mom, would step up without me asking. It was a tiny, silent victory. I share this because I know how easy it is to lose yourself in service to others. I know how natural it feels to measure your worth in the details no one else sees. But you are more than the invisible glue. That's a lesson I am still learning, one little act of letting go at a time. And as I loosened my grip, I began to sense something else stirring, a different kind of tension in the air. Because in families where old roles are tightly held, change can create ripples. Not everyone welcomes new boundaries, especially when crisis comes knocking. But sometimes the very moment you step back is when the fault lines truly begin to show. Sometimes all it takes is one small moment to shift the course of a life, a single sentence spoken out loud after years of keeping it inside. For me, that moment came on an ordinary Sunday afternoon, weeks after Thanksgiving. The winter light was thin and silver, and I was folding laundry in my quiet apartment when the phone rang. It was Mom, her voice brisk but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "Maddie, can you swing by later? Your father needs help sorting out his medical paperwork, and Ben's car is in the shop. I told him you'd drive him to work tomorrow." She wasn't asking. She was assigning. And for the first time, I felt the old habit rise in my chest, the urge to say yes, to rearrange my week, to smooth the way for everyone but myself. But something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of Sam's hopeful eyes as we decorated our small tree together the night before, or Lila's delighted squeal when I surprised her with homemade hot cocoa instead of rushing out to fix someone else's crisis. Maybe it was just exhaustion finally catching up to me. Whatever the reason, I drew a breath and said softly but firmly, "I'm sorry, Mom. I can't this time. I need to be home with the kids." Silence bloomed on the other end of the line, stretching so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Her reply came at last, brittle and confused. "Well, I just thought, you always help. I wouldn't have asked if it wasn't important." Guilt, sharp and familiar, pricked at me, but I stood my ground, explaining that I simply couldn't do it all, not anymore. "Ben can call a rideshare. I'll send Dad the number for a patient advocate. I love you, but I have to draw a line somewhere." I braced myself for anger or pleading, but instead Mom just sighed. "It's always been you, Maddie," she said. "If you won't do it, who will?" That question lingered with me long after the call ended. I wish I could say the first no brought a wave of relief, but the truth is, it felt terrifying. My hands trembled as I finished folding the towels. Old fears replayed in my head. Would my family see me as selfish? Would they think I loved them less? Saying no can feel like setting off an earthquake, quiet at first, but with aftershocks that rattle long-held patterns. That night, I found myself scrolling through old photos, watching my children sleep, trying to remind myself that choosing them and choosing myself wasn't a betrayal. It was a step toward something healthier, even if it didn't feel like it yet. A friend of mine, Leah, once shared her own story with me. She, too, was the go-to in her family, the sister who solved every crisis and never said a word about how tired she was. When she finally declined a request, refusing to host yet another holiday, When her own family needed rest, her mother stopped speaking to her for a month. It hurt, Leah confessed, but I also slept better than I had in years. And eventually, they found their own way. Her story echoed in my mind, a gentle reminder that boundaries are a form of love, not abandonment. The lesson here isn't that saying no is easy, or that people will always understand. Sometimes the first step toward real change is the hardest and loneliest one you'll ever take. But every healthy relationship, even in families, needs room for honesty. It's okay to disappoint people, even those you love, if it means protecting your well-being. You can't pour from an empty cup, no matter how long you've tried. As days passed, the mood in my family shifted. Daniela's texts grew shorter. Ben called less. Mom's messages turned practical, stripped of her usual warmth. There was a sense that something had been broken. Maybe trust. Maybe just old habits. Yet for the first time in years, I felt lighter, like I'd put down a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. But boundaries, as I would soon learn, are not always respected, especially when families are used to leaning on your yes. Just as I began to reclaim small joys for myself and my children, a new crisis appeared on the horizon, one that would test every decision I'd made and challenge the new lines I'd drawn. The calls and messages never truly stop when you're the responsible one. But after I began to say no, I noticed something unsettling. My family reached out less, except when trouble brewed. It wasn't invitations or check-ins. It was please emergencies, and the unspoken expectation that I would fix what was broken. Sometimes I'd stare at my phone wondering if it had simply become a lifeline, not to me as a daughter or sister, but as a reliable service provider. The pattern hurt in a new way, exposing a truth I hadn't wanted to face. It wasn't me they missed, it was my usefulness. The first real crisis came late one evening, only a few weeks after the Sunday I set my boundary. Daniela's name flashed on my phone. Her message was short. "Ben's in trouble." "Can you call me?" My heart dropped before I even knew the details. I listened as Daniela explained, her voice rushed and raw, how Ben had lost his job and spent through his savings falling behind on rent. Mom and Dad were frantic. Could I loan him money, or at least help them figure out what to do? "He won't talk to anyone but you." Daniela said her words weighted with expectation. I almost agreed out of habit. But something stopped me, the memory of how empty I'd felt when my efforts went unnoticed, when my presence was only wanted as a solution, never as a person. I gently told Daniela that I couldn't be the fixer this time. "I love you," I said, "but I can't keep carrying everyone else's burdens. Ben needs to figure this out, and so do Mom and Dad." The silence on the other end was thick. Eventually, Daniela sighed, her disappointment clear. "I just thought you'd want to help. That's what you always do." The familiar guilt flared up, but I held it at bay. I reminded myself that loving someone doesn't mean solving every crisis. Sometimes love means allowing others the space to struggle to grow stronger through their own mistakes. I've seen this cycle play out in other families too. My coworker James once told me how his sister only ever called when she needed a loan or a place to stay. The rest of the time, she was distant, their conversations shallow. "It makes you question what you're really worth to them," he confided. We talked about the ache that comes from realizing your presence is conditional, tied to what you can give, rather than who you are. That realization can be a turning point. Painful, yes, but also freeing. It's the moment you start to see your own value separate from what you provide. The lesson I learned in those weeks was subtle but profound. Your worth is not measured by your usefulness. You deserve to be loved for your presence, not just your problem-solving. And when you step back, you might discover which connections are truly mutual and which are built only on convenience. That knowledge can hurt, but it can also guide you toward relationships that honor who you are, not just what you can do. Still, letting go of old roles is never easy. I felt the loss of my family's daily chaos, the hush where constant requests had been. The apartment seemed too quiet at times. I questioned myself, was I heartless, selfish, cold for refusing to rescue them? But each time Sam or Layla climbed into my lap, or when we lingered over breakfast without interruption, I felt something gentle and true taking root. I was learning slowly what it meant to be present for my children and myself, not just available to everyone else. But just as the dust began to settle and I grew more confident in my new boundaries, a bigger storm loomed on the horizon, one that would threaten to pull me back in deeper than ever before. Some lessons, it turns out, have to be learned more than once, especially when family ties are tangled with old patterns and unspoken fears. The next crisis would test not just my resolve, but the very heart of what I wanted for my life and for the lives of my children. It's one thing to say you'll set boundaries. It's another thing entirely to hold them when a real storm hits. News travels fast in families, especially bad news. Within days, my parents' financial problems started surfacing. The whispers became urgent calls. Ben's situation was worse than anyone realized. He'd borrowed against the house maxed out credit cards, and there were rumors of foreclosure. Mom's messages grew desperate pleas, laced with panic, each one a tangled knot of old fears and expectations. "Can you talk to the bank? You always know how to explain things, Maddie. Could you just cover the bills for a couple of months?" The chorus was relentless. Every message was both a memory and a challenge. Would I fall back into the old pattern, or could I finally put my family first? The family I'd chosen, the one I was building with Sam and Lila. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the emails and texts, feeling the familiar ache of responsibility tighten around my chest. Sam wandered in, rubbing his eyes. "Are we helping Grandma again?" he asked quietly, a note of concern in his voice that was far too old for his years. Lila, hearing his question, looked up from her drawing eyes wide. It struck me then, my children had watched me put out fires for everyone else, sometimes at the expense of their own needs. I remembered missed bedtime stories, rushed dinners, weekends cut short because someone else needed me more. The thought made me ache, not just for myself, but for them. I wondered what lessons I'd been teaching without ever meaning to. This is a crossroads. So many single parents, especially women, find themselves torn between the pull of old loyalty and the quiet, insistent needs of their own children. I thought of my friend Monica, who once told me she finally stopped rescuing her siblings when her son said, "Do you wish I was somebody else because you're always leaving to help Auntie?" The words haunted her into making a different choice, one that felt selfish at first, but eventually brought her peace. It's so easy to believe that love means endless sacrifice, that being a good daughter or sister means always answering the call, no matter the cost. But what if the greater act of love is modeling strength, boundaries, and self-respect for the next generation? I looked at Sam and Lila, their faces open and trusting, and realized I didn't want them to grow up thinking love is measured by how much of yourself you give away. I wanted them to know that they mattered, that they were worthy of my time, my attention, and my energy, even when it meant saying no to others. I gathered them close, explaining gently that sometimes helping can mean letting people solve their own problems. "We're not turning our backs," I told them. "We're just making sure we're okay too." It was a hard lesson even for me, but I saw a flicker of relief in Sam's eyes, and Lila returned to her coloring content to be right where she was. The days that followed were not easy. I fielded more calls, some angry, some pleading. There was talk of disappointment, of family ties, of duty. I listened, nodded, but didn't waver. Each time I chose to stay home for a movie night, to linger over breakfast with my kids, to walk with them in the chilly dusk, instead of rushing to another crisis, I felt a quiet courage grow inside me. I was not abandoning my family. I was building a new one that rested on presence and peace, not on exhaustion and resentment. Here's the lesson that surfaced gentle and slow. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is put your children and yourself first. It's not selfish. It's the soil where real love grows. I began to see that breaking the old pattern was not just a gift to myself, but a legacy for my kids, teaching them that healthy love knows when to stay and when to step back. But even as I stood firmer in my new life, the world outside didn't slow down. Family storms have a way of circling back, and as the crisis deepened, I felt the pull of old roles stronger than ever. The next test would not come as a gentle question, but as a wave threatening to undo all I had built, and I would have to decide once and for all who I truly wanted to be. There's a particular weight to the knock at your door when you know it carries the past with it. After weeks of texts, voicemails, and missed calls, it was only a matter of time before my family showed up in person. It was Daniela first, no warning, just her standing on my porch, hair windswept and worry lining her face, clutching a grocery bag as if donuts could patch old wounds. She hovered at the kitchen counter, eyes darting from the family photos to her hands twisting the bag handles. "It's really bad, Maddie," she started, voice thin. "They might lose the house. Dad won't talk about it. Mom's exhausted. Ben, well, you know." The words tumbled out, landing heavy between us. She didn't ask how I was or how Sam and Lila were doing in school. She came as a messenger, carrying the family's crisis like a baton passed in a relay. It's a strange thing facing the people you love when you've changed the rules. I could see Daniela waiting for the old version of me, the one who would leap into action, build a spreadsheet, make the hard calls, and assure everyone it would be okay. But I stayed quiet, letting the silence stretch. They need you, Maddie. You always keep the peace. There it was, the old script. The need was real, but so was the expectation that I'd sacrifice my peace for theirs. I took a slow breath, my heart aching. "I can't be the fixer anymore, Danny," I said gently. "I love you, but I have to protect my family too. It's not fair to Sam and Lila, or to me, if I keep losing myself every time something breaks." Daniela's face crumpled for a moment, a flicker of hurt in her eyes. "So that's it?" she asked, her tone teetering between disbelief and resignation. "You're just out?" I shook my head, feeling the old guilt prickle beneath my skin. "No, I'm not out. I'm just not the solution anymore. I hope you all find a way, but I can't be the one to make it happen." The truth hung there, awkward but honest. She didn't argue. She left the donuts on the counter just in case, and slipped out the door, leaving the past swirling in her wake. It wasn't long before my father came by as well. He looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched, eyes tired, hat in hand. He lingered in the hallway, glancing at the photos Sam and Lila had drawn and taped to the wall. "You've done well," he said softly, but the words sounded more like regret than praise. There was a pause. "Your brother. We didn't see it coming. Your mother's embarrassed. We never meant to shut you out." His voice faded, pride and apology knotted together. I listened, letting the silence speak for both of us before answering. "I was always here, Dad. You just saw me easier when I was gone." He didn't deny it. He didn't ask again for help. He simply nodded, a gesture, heavy with all the things we'd never said. We all have a story of the time we finally spoke up, of the boundaries we set that didn't earn applause but brought us peace. My friend Taylor once shared how after years of being her family's emotional anchor, she finally told her brother she couldn't bail him out again, not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much to let him stay stuck. "It was the hardest thing I've done," she admitted. But it was the start of my real life. Our stories echoed each other. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes saving yourself is the only way to break the pattern. Here's what I learned slowly and painfully. It's not your job to save everyone. Love doesn't always mean sacrifice. It can also mean honesty, clarity, and the courage to let others stand on their own. Families don't heal when one person holds everything together. Sometimes they only start to grow when someone finally steps back. After my father left, the house was quiet, but the silence didn't sting the way it used to. It felt like a clearing, a space for something new. I spent that evening with Sam and Lila, reading stories, sharing hot chocolate, and savoring the peace I had chosen for us. I knew the fallout wasn't over. Families take time to adjust when old roles vanish. But in that quiet, I saw the first glimpses of a different kind of home, one built not on obligation, but on gentle mutual belonging. And so, with the old ways behind us and an uncertain future ahead, we began to imagine what a real home could be, one moment, one act of courage at a time. When you let go of an old role, the world doesn't always rush in to fill the empty space. Sometimes you're left with a quiet so deep you can hear your own heart. The weeks after my father's visit passed in a kind of hush, no urgent messages, no family drama playing out in the background. For the first time in years, I found myself asking, what do I want my days to look like if they don't have to revolve around fixing things for other people? It was both terrifying and liberating, like stepping out onto a frozen pond, testing each step as if the ice might crack beneath you. One Saturday, the kids and I woke to snow falling in thick, lazy flakes. The world outside was muffled and new, and our apartment felt smaller, but somehow warmer. Instead of packing up for another family obligation, I suggested we decorate our own hallway. Sam helped me take down the old, dusty frames from my childhood photos, filled with faces that now seemed distant, and together we chose new pictures, the three of us at the park. Lila in her favorite yellow dress, Sam's drawing of our building with a crooked, smiling sun overhead. We strung up paper stars, taped their artwork to the wall, and hung a wreath on the door, not for anyone else, but just for us. It amazed me the power of these small rituals. For years, I'd believed that tradition had to be inherited, that real families were built on shared history and repetition. But as Sam and Lila giggled, scattering glitter everywhere, I realized we were writing our own story in real time, one not weighed down by expectation or duty. I remembered my friend Cheryl, who after her divorce spent her first Christmas alone with her son. She told me how they invented new traditions from scratch, pancake breakfasts in pajamas, silly songs at midnight, a living room fort that stayed up for a week. It felt awkward at first, she admitted, but over time, those messy, made-up moments became the foundation of everything good that followed. Our new rituals were different, but the feeling was the same, a quiet, growing sense of belonging. It would be a lie to say I never looked back. Some nights, when the kids were asleep, I found myself missing the chaos and noise of my old family life. There's comfort in familiarity, even when it hurts. But each time I caught myself drifting toward guilt or regret, I tried to focus on what was in front of me. Sam asleep with a book on his chest, Lila's hair tangled around my fingers as I braided it for the morning. I told myself again and again that these moments were what home could mean now. There's a lesson hidden in the quiet if you listen for it. You are allowed to create a life that fits, even if it looks nothing like the one you left behind. Home isn't just a place or a set of traditions. It's the space where you feel seen, safe, and free to grow. For so long, I'd measured love by sacrifice, by what I could give away. Now I was learning to see love in presence and laughter, in the shared silence of a snow-filled afternoon. As winter deepened, so did our roots. Our little rituals multiplied: movie nights with popcorn walks to the library and mismatched hats, pancakes for dinner, just because we felt like it. We made mistakes, burned the toast, argued over board games. But in all that imperfection, I felt a steady warmth building a sense that we belonged to each other no matter what we'd left behind. Yet life has always moved forward. The world outside our apartment was still uncertain. My parents' house was up for sale. My family scattered in ways both physical and emotional. There were new messages, sometimes hints of hope and hurt woven together. But now, I had something solid to return to, a home of my own, making a family shaped by choice and gentle care. And as the days grew longer, I found myself ready at last to face what was left of the past, not with anger or regret, but with the calm certainty that we had survived, and more than that, we had begun to truly belong. There's a kind of grief that slips in quietly when you say goodbye to the life you thought you'd always have, even if that life was full of cracks and disappointments. For weeks after my family's house was sold, I found myself adrift, mourning not just a place, but a whole era. The family group chats faded into silence, the stream of requests and small emergencies stopped, and the ache of that absence surprised me. I didn't miss the drama, the chaos, or the never-ending obligations. But there was still a hole where all that noise used to be. Grief isn't always about loss. Sometimes it's about making room for something new and sitting with the empty space while you wait for it to grow. I found myself sorting through old boxes photos from high school letters, from college handmade birthday cards from Sam and Lila. Each item was a thread in the tangled web of family memory. And as I sorted them, I let myself feel both the love and the hurt, neither one canceling out the other. My friend Evelyn once told me about her own journey through this hidden kind of grief. After years of trying to fix her mother's life, she finally stepped back for good, and for months she felt both freedom and a strange, haunting sadness. You expect anger or guilt, she told me, but what surprised me was the loneliness. Even toxic connections leave an echo behind. It's tempting to imagine that once you set boundaries, the hardest part is over, that peace will just blossom in the cleared-out space. The truth is, letting go means learning to live with the ache at least for a while. There were days I doubted myself, wondering if I'd done the right thing. Sometimes I'd see a photo of my parents on social media smiling at a church picnic, and a wave of longing would catch me off guard. Was it really so bad, the old life? Had I made too much of the pain, or not enough? These questions didn't have easy answers. All I could do was keep breathing, keep showing up for Sam and Lila, and trust that the ache would soften in time. The lesson I learned was this: grief isn't something to rush or hide from. It's a natural companion to change, especially when that change is chosen for your own well-being. I let myself feel it in the quiet evenings, in the firsts and lasts, in the moments when I realized I no longer needed permission to rest. I started to find comfort in small things, Sam's laughter echoing through our apartment, Lila's hand in mine as we crossed the street, the sun stretching a little farther across our living room floor each afternoon. These were the signs that new roots were taking hold slowly, quietly in the space where loss had lived. One night, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat alone by the window with a cup of tea, looking out at the empty street below. For the first time, I didn't feel compelled to fill the silence with memories or regrets. I felt the grief, but also a growing gratitude for the lessons learned, for the courage to step away, and for the chance to build something better. I realized that letting go of my old family role hadn't made me less loving. It had allowed me to love more honestly, with space for myself and my children. Of course, the world outside kept moving. I still received the occasional message from Daniela or a holiday card from my parents with a short, uncertain note. These small connections weren't the lifelines they used to be, but gentle reminders that family can evolve even when it fractures. I answered when I wanted, stayed silent when I needed to, and let the relationships take on new shapes, looser, but somehow kinder. And as the seasons shifted and spring approached, I felt myself opening to the future. The grief didn't vanish, but it settled into something softer, a quiet knowledge that you can love what you leave behind and still move forward. The final chapter wasn't about leaving, but about beginning, finding healing, forgiveness, and a new sense of what home could be for all of us. Looking back, it's easy to trace the journey by the milestones: the Thanksgiving that felt like a closed door the first time I said no, the storm of family emergencies I didn't rush in to fix. But the real transformation happened in the quiet moments, the nights spent holding Sam and Lila close, the slow mornings where we built new rituals out of pancakes and laughter, the small, stubborn hope that healing could take root in the most unexpected places. Each part of this story was shaped by choices, some loud and defiant, others soft and uncertain, but all pointing toward the same truth: you can love your family and still choose yourself. It's not easy to let go of old roles or to redefine what home means. I learned that being the responsible one brought its own kind of loneliness, a feeling shared by so many people who spend their lives quietly carrying everyone else's burdens. Setting boundaries didn't make me heartless. It made me honest. And when I finally stepped back, when I stopped measuring my worth by how much I could give, I found a gentler, steadier love waiting in the space I'd cleared. The ache of grief never fully disappeared, but it became less a wound and more a reminder, a proof that change, though painful, is the birthplace of new beginnings. My hope is that wherever you are in your own story, you'll remember this. You deserve a life where you are valued for who you are, not just what you do. It's okay to grieve what you've lost, to feel both freedom and sadness in the wake of change. But it's also okay to build new traditions, to nurture a home that feels right, even if it looks nothing like the one you left behind. You don't have to explain your boundaries to everyone. You don't have to fix every problem to be worthy of love. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to simply belong to yourself and the people who cherish you most. If my journey has resonated with you, if you've seen yourself in Maddie's story, or if you're standing at your own threshold, wondering whether you can step forward, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What's the hardest boundary you've ever had to set? How did you find your way back to yourself? Your story matters, and you never know who needs to hear it. And if you'd like to see more stories about real families, quiet courage, and the hope that comes from choosing a new path, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button if you found comfort here, and let us know what topics you'd like to see in the future. Every comment, every new subscriber helps us build a community where everyone's story is honored, messy, complicated, and beautiful in its own way. Thank you for spending this time with me, for listening, and for being part of this gentle revolution where we redefine home, not by what we've lost, but by what we're finally willing to claim for ourselves. Remember, you are not alone. The first step is always the hardest, but it leads somewhere softer, truer, and full of hope. So stay a while, share your story, and together, let's build a home where everyone belongs.